Imagine dedicating your life to faith, only to realize you're part of a horrifying prophecy. A young nun, raised by the church, dreams of serving God, but instead, she becomes the vessel for pure evil. When she uncovers the dark secret behind her past, it's already too late because the devil's child is growing inside her. This is the chilling origin story of the Antichrist, the beginning of an unholy nightmare. To know what happened, watch till the ends. The movie starts in 1971 with Father Brennan. He enters a church that is still being built and steps into a confessional to speak with Father Harris. Brennan shows him a photo of a baby along with a priest and two nuns. On the back of the photo, there's only one word written, Shanna. Harris is shocked by the photo, but hesitantly answers Brennan's questions. He reveals that the church performed a ritual where a devoted Catholic woman was blindfolded, tied to an altar, and forced by the clergy to mate with Satan. The baby in the picture was born from that ritual. Suddenly, Harris runs away, and Brennan chases after him. As they reach outside, a pole falls from the construction site, breaking a stained glass window and fatally striking the back of Father Harris's head. In Rome, Cardinal Lawrence welcomes a young American novitiate named Margaret as she arrives in Italy. Margaret, an orphan raised by the church, struggled with hallucinations and manic episodes as a child, but Lawrence helped her overcome them. He has brought her to Rome to finish her training and take her vows to become a nun. As they drive, they pass a group of protesters. Lawrence explains that while some are fighting for better jobs, most are young atheists who reject authority, including the church. He hopes faithful individuals like Margaret can help bring them back. Lawrence takes Margaret to an abbey run by Sister Silva. Silva gives a grand tour of abbey and explains that the abbey cares for orphans and helps unwed mothers give birth. Margaret meets a troubled teenage girl named Carlita, who is often avoided because of her bad behavior. Margaret connects with her, realizing Carlita struggles with the same issues she faced as a child. Later, Margaret arrives at the small apartment she'll be sharing with her fellow novice, Luz. She is surprised by Luz's carefree nature, as Luz dresses provocatively and sneaks out to nightclubs. Luz explains that before committing to her final vows, she wants to experience life outside the church to be sure of her decision. As time goes on, Margaret and Luz grow close, and Margaret gets used to the daily life of the nuns. She's surprised to see that many of them smoke, gossip, and even enjoy jumping on trampolines. However, she also notices the darker side of the abbey. One nun, Sister Angelica, wanders the halls like a ghost, muttering to herself, and seems to have an unsettling obsession with Margaret. One night, Luz convinces Margaret to put on revealing clothes and join her in a nearby club. Since Margaret grew up in the church, she's never experienced anything like this before. At the club, they meet two guys, Paolo and Alfonso, and start drinking with them. While Luz leaves with Alfonso, Margaret spends time with Paolo, talking before moving to the dance floor. Drunk and caught up in the moment, she starts making out with him. The next morning, Margaret wakes up with a hangover in her apartment, unable to remember how the night ended. She asks Luz if she did anything embarrassing, and Luz reassures her that she stopped her from going too far with Paolo and brought her home safely. Margaret goes to work at the abbey and watches a young woman giving birth. She is horrified by the woman's screams of pain and disturbed by how the nuns and doctor treat the process harshly, cutting into her without care. To her shock, she sees a demonic hand emerging from the woman. Terrified by what seems like a hallucination, she runs out of the abbey in fear. While she's out in the city, Father Brennan approaches her and shows her the photo and asks for her help in finding Shanna. He explains that Shanna is living in the abbey and is in serious danger from the church. Since he is banned from entering, he hopes Margaret can help because she is new. Brennan also tells her that the girl in the photo will be someone who has witnessed great tragedy. Margaret refuses, but Brennan gives her his address in case she changes her mind. The next day, while the children play in the courtyard, everyone suddenly notices Sister Angelica standing on the balcony, soaked in gasoline. She looks directly at Margaret and Carlita and says, "It's all for you," before setting herself on fire and jumping, hanging herself. Shaken by what she witnessed, Margaret returns to Father Brennan. He explains that the church is divided into two groups, those who genuinely follow God, and those willing to do anything to keep the church in power. Brennan tells Margaret that he was excommunicated for opposing the corrupt faction, but continues to fight against them. They both realize that Carlita must be the baby from the photo, and they need to get her out of the abbey. He warns Margaret that the evil sect will soon perform a horrific ritual where Satan will impregnate his own daughter. The resulting child, a boy, will become the Antichrist and bring about the apocalypse. Brennan instructs Margaret to check Carlita for his 666 birthmark, the 6th day of his 6th month at 6 a.m., and to find her birth records, then bring them to him. Brennan also notes that a birthmark in the shape of 666 would also be hidden somewhere on Carlita's body if she is the spawn of Satan. Later, during a group trip to a museum, Margaret tries to ask a young priest, Father Gabriel, for help in locating the records. However, he refuses out of fear, knowing that Sister Silva is closely watching both of them. As they continue, the group gets caught in a violent student protest. Amid the chaos, Margaret suddenly experiences another terrifying hallucination, where she's attacked by a monstrous creature that only she can see. Back at the abbey, Sister Silva calls Margaret to her office. She tells her that the nuns, along with the cardinal, are concerned about her mental state. Silva forbids Margaret from speaking to Carlita and says she is not ready to take her vows. As Margaret walks home, she spots Paolo and chases after him. He looks panicked and apologizes repeatedly, trying to get away. He mumbles something about a birthmark, saying he didn't know. Suddenly, a car comes out and slams into him. Horrified, Margaret rushes to his side, trying to comfort him, only to realize she's holding just the top half of his body. While everyone else attends Luz's vow ceremony the next day, Margaret sneaks into Sister Silva's office. She finds a key to a hidden door and follows a dark passageway, leading to a room filled with the records Brennan asked for. As she searches through them, she discovers multiple files labeled Shanna. Each one belongs to a different child. Most were horribly deformed and died shortly after birth. Margaret quickly gathers the files and tries to escape with Carlita, but before they can get away, they're caught. As the nuns restrain Margaret, she catches a glimpse of Carlita's mouth and sees the dreaded birthmark, 666, hidden on the roof of her mouth. The nuns drag Margaret away, locking her in a suffocating room. As the night falls, she is tormented by terrifying visions and eerie voices surrounding her. Just as Margaret is on the verge of losing her mind, Father Gabriel appears and unlocks the door, freeing her. They quietly sneak out of the abbey and meet up with Father Brennan to go through the records. While examining them, they notice one file is missing its photo, the same one Brennan has. Then it hits them. The baby in the picture can't be Carlita because its birthmark is on its scalp. That means there wasn't just one healthy child, there was another. Margaret suddenly remembers what Paolo was trying to tell her. Panicked, she runs her fingers through her hair and finds the dreaded mark on her own scalp, meaning Margaret was the baby in the photo Brennan had. She finally remembers what happened that night at the club. She wasn't just drunk. She was taken to a secret chamber at the abbey, where the horrific ritual was performed on her. Now knowing that she is pregnant with the Antichrist, Father Brennan and Father Gabriel rush Margaret to an abortion clinic, but before they can get there, another car crashes into them from the side. Both priests are knocked unconscious, while Margaret, injured but awake, crawls out of the wreckage. To her horror, in mere minutes, her pregnancy progresses to full term and her water breaks. Members of the church retrieve her as she passes out. Margaret wakes up strapped to a bed, with Cardinal Lawrence standing beside her. He reveals his full involvement in the horrific plan, telling her she should be proud. By giving birth to the Antichrist, she will help the church regain its power and save millions of souls. As nuns and clergy gather around, a doctor begins a C-section. Margaret, barely conscious, watches in horror as the doctor removes a strange sac from her womb. When it's cut open, two babies emerge, one boy and one girl. But everyone ignores the girl and praises the boy. Margaret asks to hold him, and when Lawrence gives her the baby, she stabs the cardinal in the neck with a scalpel. She then tries to kill the baby boy, but then Luz stabs Margaret. The clergy take the baby boy and depart, leaving Margaret weak and collapsing to the floor. Before leaving, Sister Silva orders one of her followers to destroy all evidence. He douses the room in gasoline, sets it ablaze. Margaret, barely holding on, clutches her abandoned daughter, resigned to die in the fire. But then, Carlita suddenly appears, rushing to her aid. She helps Margaret and the baby escape the burning room just in time. As they flee, a horrifying, inhuman scream echoes behind them. Glancing back, they see a massive jackal-shaped beast, Satan himself. writhing in agony as the flames engulfs him. The members of the church then kill the baby belonging to the Thorne family and replace it with Margaret's baby boy. Years later, Margaret, Carlita, and Margaret's daughter live in isolation in a secluded cabin, far from prying eyes. One day, Father Brennan shows up and Margaret pulls a shotgun on him. He says he means no harm. He's there to warn Margaret that the church knows they're all still alive and will be coming for them. He also tells her that her baby boy is now living with the Thorne family, and his name is Damien. In this way, movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.